What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Reason to Doubt, your source for all things skeptical. I am Jordan, and I am joined with two very special guests. One literally came in as the music was playing. So we have Adiel here, who's been here before, and Morris, aka the Secular Kenyan, here for the first time. How's it going?
Hey, Jordan.
Good.
Yeah. Good to have you back. So I know everybody knows me, but in case people don't know the two of you, why don't we real briefly have you two introduce yourselves, kind of talk about your channel and like what you're trying to do here on the internet. And since nobody's met you before, Morris, we'll start with you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jordan, and Reason to Doubt channel. It's a privilege to be here. I'm delighted. About me, I'm Secular Kenyan, and what do I do? Being a Secular Kenyan, I just we're just trying to. We come from me and Adiel. We're in Kenya, in East Africa, so we come from very religious community. I think it's about 80% Christianity here and about 12, 13 Muslim. So it's quite religious. So what we are trying to do is to first of all spread secularism in the sense of separation of state and separation of church and state, because they are quite intertwined here, more than on average democracy. They manifest in every aspect of our life, of our governance. Yeah, I'm doing Secular Kenyan on all social media platforms, but I have my channel, my YouTube channel is called The Hangout with Secular Kenyan. I'm Secular Kenyan on Twitter, I'm Secular Kenyan on TikTok, I'm Secular Kenyan on Facebook. Yeah, and I hope we enjoy this conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. And Adiel, why don't you introduce yourself too?
Hi, so my name is Adiel Kilonzi. I come from the Tuongee na Kilonzi YouTube channel. Tuongee na Kilonzi actually means let us talk with Kilonzi. So I'm trying to spread secularism, same thing that my friend Maurice is trying to do. And that's how actually we linked up and became good friends. So the thing we're trying to do is actually push for secularism and push for separation of church and state, actually here in Kenya, because it's actually a big thing. It's way bigger than it is maybe somewhere like the US. So that's what we're trying to push for. Thank you very much.
So in Kenya, is there any sort of constitutional idea of a secular government, or is it kind of by design religious in nature?
I don't know who the question is to, but it's expressive. Actually, our constitution borrows very much from the United States Constitution. We have governors here, we have Senate, we have the same Bill of Rights, and the Constitution expressly, Article 8 of Kenya Constitution expressly states there shall be no, Kenya is a secular state, there shall be no state religion, and it's unconstitutional for government to advance the interests of one religion over another, or any religion for that matter. But in practice,
Yeah,
that is in law. In practice, it's quite different.
But yeah, that's what I said. Well, there's also a caveat, because the fact that I think the biggest part that guys are trying to, or we are trying to bring out, is that our constitution states that we, the people of Kenya, recognize God as a supreme being. So that's the very first statement in our constitution. But the constitution actually separates church and state. So they are actually two different things. They are not the same thing.
Yeah, I can empathize with that. Of course, in the American system, we ostensibly have a separation of church and state, but particularly in the last few years, that wall has gotten eroded more, I think. And I'm sure it's the same there. There seems to be a big resurgence worldwide, really, of religious fundamentalism. Kind of, it almost feels like a backlash against losing ground, at least in America. Fundamentalist institutions have been losing influence over the last few decades, and so there's kind of like a resurgence as like fighting back against this kind of wave.
What would you attribute that to?
Go ahead. Sorry.
What would you attribute that to? Because I think America has been an exception on this frontier for long, especially among developed countries.
Yeah. So I think that America has a super religious roots, and so religion has, particularly Christianity, has enjoyed a privileged place for centuries, and so that's kind of inextricably linked with the racist structures that also put into place in America, and as a civil rights movement and other things have kind of eroded that power space of the white Christian male over the last 40, 50 years. That segment of the population feels threatened because, well, in a sense they're kind of being pulled down to equality, so but I guess when you're used to privilege, that feels bad. So I think that's my opinion anyway of how why we're seeing what we're seeing now, why someone like Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis is able to, even though that they have like absolutely, from any kind of objective standpoint, no connection to Christianity whatsoever, are able to use the language of Christianity to co-opt it.
Yeah.
So I thought we kind of talked beforehand. We'd have a few questions. We'd chat about some things about like our conversion stories and what it's like being an atheist in Kenya versus America. And of course, audience, feel free to jump in if you have any questions for myself or any of the two guests. So why don't we real briefly talk about why you're an atheist? You're from much even more intensely religious country than my own, which is more religious than the rest of the developed world, right? So what's your path to deconversion? Did you start as a Christian and become an atheist, or how'd that work? Let's start with you, Morris.
Okay. Yeah, by default, if you're born in Kenya, you are from a very Christian family. All exceptional in rare cases, you're from Islam. Or in case of Adiel Kilonzi, then you're from a cult. But I'm a Baptist by upbringing. My parents are still very staunch Baptist churchgoers and very active in their church. But my journey, I don't remember. I remember questioning, but I don't remember at the time when I said, okay, from tomorrow now I'm an atheist. But I remember being prepared to become a Catholic, not a Catholic, what do you call them? A priest is a Catholic, a pastor. I would use a pastor, so that I can help in the church. And that one actually informed every part of my life. Here, from the primary school I went to the high school I went to everything around my life was about the church. But when I got to after high school, before I joined the university, we normally have a 2-year break. It's in the process of trying to to prepare myself whether I'm going to go to advance the university or am I going to stay here and join a theological school, because that was the plan, to go and study theology and become a pastor. And a lot of questions. I've always had questions even when I was very active in church in my high school, but I never actively took a role to ask these questions. So now that I was a bit nervous that I'm going out to become a pastor, and there are a lot of these questions that I still feel they have not been answered to me. So I decided to ask the Reverend and this question, mostly to do with the Old Testament, also New Testament. Not because I was like skeptical per se, but because I wanted to get an answer that I will, in a position where my church person would ask me the same question as their pastor and I cannot respond to them. Yeah, and mostly the question was related to about slavery. I think I had done a bit of history online, because they could not allow me to study history in high school because they had to accommodate religious educations. So, and there's a limit. So I had done my own study of history.
Can't have you going out on your own and learning too much. You might ask uncomfortable questions,
Yeah. So the issue of slavery was key for me. I didn't want a response to that. I wanted an issue of response to women, because I considered I wouldn't imagine the way I love my mom or my sister being treated in the way that the Bible would ideally advocate for, even in the New Testament. The issue of rape, I think that's a big issue for me. And the other issue is the punishment of children, especially in the Old Testament or the New Testament. And this, of course, every murder here and there. Like, I had questions like, what did the Egyptians kill firstborn do? Like, what was their punishment? Or Ayub's first family. It's normally presented as a nice story. Ayub is a hero in the story, but because he got a new family. But I'm like, would that be a moral issue? If I told you I'm going to quote unquote murder your family, but I'll give you a more beautiful family, how would you?
I mean, yeah, I killed your kids, but you got new kids now. So
yeah, and a more handsome one.
We just mention Ayub's job.
Yeah,
Ayub's job.
Yeah, job. Oh, I confused Ayub and that Ayub is Swahili. Okay.
Ayub's job.
So yeah, that was basically it. I decided I didn't get any satisfaction, and in fact, the thing that put me off is to be told that that's the devil tempting you. I remember that phrase very clearly. That the devil is trying to intervene. The devil is jealous that you are about to become a minister, and he's trying all the ways to plant doubts in your mind so that he can interfere with your plan of being whatever God has planned for me. So I decided to go to the university because at least I had government full scholarship. I went, and that's why when I got to university, my skepticism actually now grew so much because for the first time I was exposed to people of different religion. I stopped this arrogance that I thought our religion was really the correct one. We are the only one going to heaven. And I was so religion in a way that not just the arrogance about being Christian, but our church Baptists. I used to pity people like Catholic and Jehovah Witness. They don't, how come you guys can't see that Baptist has the right message and you guys don't? And now when I was exposed to these Muslims, I had Muslim friends, I had Catholic friends, I had people from Seventh-day Adventists, and we could have this conversation. I think that really helped my skepticism. By the time I graduated, I was completely an atheist, but I did not come out maybe until about 7 years later. I did not come out, yeah. I think, and finally at that point, I also didn't know that being an atheist is an option. I knew I was uncomfortable with Christianity. I knew I was comfortable with Islam, but I always thought the way it was presented, religion is so powerful here that I thought if I leave Christianity, then I have to become a Muslim. I never knew there is an option outside of that. So in 2017, the first atheist association was registered. Funny enough, my mom, who is very Christian, was the one who broke the news to me in a manner that there are people trying to bring evil and talking, we should not spread the gospel, blah, blah, blah. So he was like talking about that as those news in an incriminating way. And 1 year down the line, I was a registered member. So yeah, that's it. That's my journey. And yeah, now I'm a member of the Atheist Society of Kenya, and I'm a member of the new organization called SASK, which is Skeptics and Atheist Society of Kenya. I'm actually the chairman, and we have about 467 members. ADL is part of our executive as well, and we are doing a good job. We are trying. I can rightfully blow our trumpet. We are really doing a good job. Yeah.
I think it's fascinating to me what you said about how you didn't realize that being an atheist was even an option. How like your upbringing can shape not just your view, but what you think of as possible. You know,
exactly.
I had an experience. I was raised like young Earth creationist, and I constantly had questions like, what about thermodynamics? Why doesn't, like, you say it doesn't work, but it seems like something basic that scientists would have figured out. And I was like, I wonder why they don't know that. And it never occurred to me to go find out. It's just because it was so pounded in my head that this is the way it is. This is the Bible. This is the answer, Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Adiel, I know you were a Jehovah's Witness, and we spent, I put a link in the chat to our last conversation where we dove into that a lot. But if you want to give us the highlights of what it was like being raised in a cult.
So, funny thing, I want just to preface this. In Kenya, we've been of late we've been having a cult that has been hitting headlines, and the cult is known as the Shakahola cult. So, this is a cult led by a pastor known as Pastor Mackenzie. So, the guys who have been stabbing themselves to death, some of them. So it's actually like the right time to talk about cults and high control groups and the tactics they use. So from the previous chat, I was a Jehovah's Witness, and Jehovah's Witnesses are young earth creationists, as you said, Jordan. So I believe the same things. I believe the earth was 6,000 years old. I believe that I was one of the chosen few guys who knew about the truth about God.
What are the
And I'm
odds that
telling
you just
you,
happen to be born into the right one? What luck?
I'm telling you, I was so lucky to be born among the. By then, it was when I was born. I think it was around 6 million. Now they're around maybe 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses. And for sure, I tell you, Maurice was confident he was going to heaven. I was sure Maurice was not going to heaven because we were going to inherit this earth. And Maurice, I'm sorry, you are going to die in Armageddon by Jehovah's Witness standards. So that was where I came from Jehovah, from a firm believing Jehovah's Witness in 2019. That's when I started questioning my belief. I started trying what led me down this path was trying to find out. I knew they were atheists, but what do atheists truly believe? And how would I convert an atheist to be a Jehovah's Witness? And that led me down a rabbit hole. So now I was finding myself listening to conversations between atheists and Christians, and these guys were winning the show. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. They are making a point. And that's how I found myself down this path, becoming an atheist. I was afraid to listen to criticism because Jehovah's Witnesses are highly discouraged from listening to any critiques. They call them apostates. There is nothing that Jehovah's Witnesses fear more than apostates. So, but this time I was like, atheists aren't technically apostates. So that's how I ended up listening to them. And well, here I am.
That's always a great sign when they tell you not to listen to people who disagree with you. Like that's how you know you've really got the facts on your side, is when you can't listen to anyone who disagrees.
There's no bigger red flag than that.
Yeah. So tell me about what life is like fighting the fight for secularism and atheism in Kenya. Like you say that the religious makeup is over 80% theist, right? So how are secular individuals, well, secular doesn't necessarily mean not religious, but how are people fighting for secularism viewed in the culture?
Well, yeah, it's a what? I'd call it a war. The only thing that's on our side is the constitution. I think that has really helped us. And actually, that's why you see a lot of secularism in Kenya compared to our neighbors, which being an atheist to an extent would be considered. In Somalia, you'd be killed, which is just our neighbor here. In Uganda, you might not be killed, but it's highly taboo to have some of this conversation. Even the atheists who are there are like slightly underground. So for here, the constitution is our side. In 2016, the first atheist society was registered. And 2 months down the line, the Attorney General deregistered, used his veto powers to deregister the association because it was, quote unquote, against the norms, the moral fabric of the society. They had a very ambiguous excuse there. And are we okay? And then from there,
yeah.
And then from there, the society went to court, and it's through a court order that the society was registered. The same cycle is now repeating itself currently, where we are trying to register another society. It's been a year of trying to run from one office to the other. We've complied with everything, but the registrar will not just find it, despite the fact the law allows, but they will not just find it like it's a good thing to register a secular organization. So it's a backlash. As much as you might have facts and law on your side, there's a very strong culture. There's a very strong Christian culture that will not allow you to technically to be able to be registered. So yeah, but the good thing is that the Constitution has also given us the backing. So we're able to hold our meetings. We are able to air our opinions. We are able to challenge things like national prayer breakfasts or other government involvement. So it's really a good thing that the law is aside, but it's a tough battle because you get frustrations here and there. And the church also has a very huge voice, especially in this country. The church there's a very thin line between the church and the government in Kenya. So in terms of appointments, in terms of every decision that is being made, you can see the footprints of the church in it. And so at least we have some small space that we can push back. But being minority is still not an easy work. But we're trying, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe to add on that, Maurice, maybe I'd say that the thing is we had an election not so long ago, and with the new regime is actually hell-bent on pushing this narrative that they and the church are one, because that's how they got elected. They actually pushed the narrative that they are working with the church, and that's what gained them popularity.
Yeah. Yep. Let me complement that. In Kenya, it's very similar to the conservative US, where even if you're not a Christian, you have to say praise the Lord, God bless you, for you to get elected to a political office. So that one is very key for you to be. It was strong in our elections last year, where the winning party labeled itself as the party of God, and they labeled the others as atheists or people who are not God chosen. And so you could see the church was very close to that. But that was very peak for the last 4 months of the regime, 5 months, 6 months, I would say. But then there is the issue that Adiel Kilonzi talked about, the current, we are calling it the Shakahola massacre, which is it's sort of what audience would relate to is the Johnstone massacre. So what happened is this pastor,
for the audience's sake, that's where drinking the Kool-Aid comes from.
Yeah, but now in the case of the massacre, actually the figures are almost the same. So in the case of the Shakahola massacre, which is in Kilifi, which is at a coastal town in Kenya, the pastor is convincing his members that they need to fast completely for about 40-50 days so that they can physically meet Jesus Christ. And so what has happened, they have been going to a forest. There's a huge forest. They go there, they fast, they go with their family, they fast, and they've been dying. As we speak,
if you don't eat anything for a month, I mean, you're going to meet God.
Yeah, technically, yes, but technically he's right. But but as of last month, we had so this one went on for three years without the government knowing. There was some intelligence here, but nobody took it seriously. So now they're exhuming mass graves where these people have been burying their church members. As of last week, we were at 349 people confirmed from the church. And we have about 600, almost 700 who are unaccounted for, who are reported missing. So probably we are going to hit 900 people who are victims of this cult within 3 years. So that one has really, it's a sad thing, but it's also has sobered up the government from this religious rhetoric. Now there is a commission that has been formed to regulate the church for the first time in Kenya. In fact, we are supposed to present our proposals next week. So the church will be regulated because just like in US, the prosperity gospel is a huge industry here. And just like in United States, it's motivated by profit and the fact that the proceeds in that sector are tax-free. So, and unaccountable, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know I have a lot of friends who are Christian, who are, good people who in their churches work hard to support the poor and needy, and that's great. But there's also your mega churches like Joel Osteen and stuff who clearly like they're in it for the money. That's why they're there, or you've got Kenneth Copeland with his 2 personal jets or whatever. Yeah. Jonathan says secular is an underrated label. I agree because I think it's both underrated and misunderstood because some people view secular, even skeptical, as something that like means you're anti-religion, whereas like that you could be a Christian who supports a secular government. There's no contradiction there, right?
Exactly.
And you
Yeah.
can be a religious person who's a skeptic. All it means is that you doubt claims and look for evidence before you believe them. That's all that it means. So that doesn't. We don't necessarily have to be enemies, But
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Well, I think we might switch gears for a second. We've got a couple atheism-centered questions we thought it might be fun to dig into. The first one is probably the easier of the two. What's our favorite argument for atheism? Now, when I say atheist, I mean that I believe no gods exist. I know a lot of people have different definitions. Is that how you two use the word?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a lot. I don't know if you follow the drama on Twitter. That there's a lot of like very angry conversations that occur around the definition of this word. That's how I'm going to use it. I don't think any gods exist, and that's why I'm an atheist. So my favorite argument for atheism, it's not an argument like globally. In fact, I don't know of many like global arguments for atheism that would argue against any conception of God whatsoever. But the one that I personally find most convincing, I think, is probably divine hiddenness, which is like if God exists, like where is he? Is basically what it comes down to. Like if the idea is that if there is this deity who's loving and wants to have a relationship with me, then it seems like I would know he exists. Like he could just like tell me, like directly. He wouldn't need to do it through a book or through a pastor or whomever. He could just like talk to me, And the fact that that doesn't happen indicates to me that, well, at least there's no God who wants a relationship with me. I mean, maybe he just doesn't like me very much. I don't know. Go ahead.
Maybe I can put my thought on this, and I'd say actually the argument from divine hiddenness is one of the greatest arguments that I have for my atheism. Though I define my atheism as I would say that the fact that no one has proved to me yet that a God exists, or no one has proved that a God or gods exist. That is how I define my atheism. It is a lack of belief in any deity. But then the divine hiddenness argument is actually great because it shows like if I wanted to talk to my kids, I mean, I'd pick the best method ever. Right now, I'd actually maybe video call them. A few years ago, maybe that wasn't possible. I'd actually phone call them. And some few years back, maybe I'd write a letter. But if you have the best technology to your advantage, then it doesn't make sense why you wouldn't use it. And that God would have the best technology. He could talk to all of us at the same time. But also the other argument I'd use, the contradiction is especially with the gods of classical Christianity, classical Islam. You find that the properties they give to these gods, they usually we can say they are contradictory. For example, if God is all powerful, he's all knowing, what does all powerful mean? Can he do something that he himself cannot undo? So you find that some contradictions come up when you start to think of it in these terms.
Well, usually they have to often what you hear is that all powerful doesn't mean like all powerful. It means like they can do any not logically contradictory thing. And then you get into like, well, does that mean that logic's more powerful than God, you know? But I'm happy to accept, like, basically I'm happy to accept whatever conception of God they tell me, because, you know, it's their belief, not mine. But yeah, I brought up the divine hiddenness. I can't remember who I was talking to, but somebody I was talking to, and they were like, well, God did communicate to us. He communicated to us through my holy book. And like, how else would you want him to communicate? Like, and I was like, well, he could like do it again, like right now. It's not like this is like divine Twitter. He didn't like run into a character limit and like, oh, I can't say anymore. You know, I was saying why he didn't put more in the Bible, for example. He's like, I was like, it's like he ran out of room. He could change it all that he could just poof. Every Bible has like tailor made for you, right? It could say, "Dear Jordan," right at the Genesis 1:1. You know. Anyway,
Exactly.
yeah. So now, to be fair, I don't think that destroys any kind of God, but it destroys a God that wants to have a relationship with me, which, like, you know, they say he does. DM says, I don't think you can make a positive. DM says, I don't think you can make a positive assertion that no gods exist based on divine hiddenness. I don't think any one argument is going to get you to no gods exist like all by itself, right? So you could have other conceptions of God for which divine hiddenness doesn't like apply, for example. But when you combine some of the other arguments, I'm sure we'll get into. And again, this isn't like, I don't think you have to be like certain that gods don't exist. I'm not certain that you exist, you know? So like, well, you know, certainty isn't what we're going for. It's just like, what's more probable, right?
I would say the way I define atheism for me, I normally say I'm an atheist to Abrahamic gods. The God of Christian, the God of Islam, the God of Judaism. I can demonstrate those gods don't logically exist. But if you tell me your God is universe, your God is nature, your God is all the other 20,000 gods out there, then I have to be agnostic. I have to be a strong agnostic because I cannot logically, it will depend on the definition you give me of your God. But for the Abrahamic God, we have a definition already, which you can borrow from the religious text, which is they are all powerful, they are all loving, they are all, so they have characteristics that are contradictory in nature. They cannot be just and merciful, they cannot be all loving and at the same time you explain the problem of evil. So they cannot give us free will. They are omniscience, so they already know what you're going to do with the free will anyway. See, so those kind of contradictions tells you that they cannot exist as defined in the holy text, in the very holy text. So with that, I normally say I'm agnostic for all the other gods, but I can be certain, 99.9 sure, that those Abrahamic gods don't exist as defined in those texts. But for the hiddenness argument, for my best argument, hiddenness is a very good argument, actually. I like it because for me, I normally argue from, I've been brought up as a Christian. I was brought up as a Christian. I was being turned into a pastor before I quote unquote saw the light. I was falling in a trap. So I was, I normally look at the experience of, because one of the counter argument you get from the divine hiddenness is you have to have faith, you have to experience God, you have to be holy, you have to accept, you have to, all these things, your sins are preventing you from experiencing God. And I like the counter that I normally get from Matt, which is the case of Paul. For those who know the Bible, the case of Paul, the Damascus experience. Paul, as when he got the Damascus experience, he was coming from persecuting Christians. He had just left a town where that was what he was doing for a living. There's no point where he repented just before he got that experience. It tells you if Paul, with all the sins that he was doing, the Damascus experience was good for him, it should be. I've not even done a quarter of the sins that Paul used to do. I've not killed anybody. It should be much good for me with my little sins, I would say. And finally, my other best argument, I like its morality. Most atheists don't think it's a good argument, but the very existence of a good, loving God, the Abrahamic God, I think that that argument negates that such a God can exist. The very evil we see, the kind of the kind of kids being born with problems. People who would say they surely don't deserve to suffer. Yet there's a God who has a quote unquote divine plan. So this kid being born with sickle cell anemia, he knew that 1,000,000 years ago that this kid will be born with this, and now he has to act surprised, and we have to remind him in prayers. So for me, the existence of God, I think the existence of evil, to a large extent, doesn't justify that there is no Abrahamic God, maybe not other gods. There could be another God out there who is not
kind of a jerk.
moral. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe God just doesn't care very much, which, I mean, that'd be fine. That's like a different God, yeah.
Or
maybe
maybe
just
you
sarcastic.
can chime in, or maybe you can chime in that one thing is that, like, let's say a deistic God would be so hard to disprove. That is a deistic God who just set things into motion and left and never looked back at what he created or anything. I'd say that that's a hard God to disprove, and I think that such a God, and probably because you can't disprove, then maybe you can say I'm agnostic towards such a God. But then the God of classical religion, Christianity, Islam, as you said, Maurice, that's a God we can clearly disprove.
Well, so I agree that like a deistic God that just kind of poofs everything into existence, then pieces out, is very difficult to disprove. But on this, by making it difficult to disprove, you also make it very difficult to provide any evidence for it. It seems like a universe with such a God and a universe without such a God are identical. Like there's no observation I can make to distinguish. And given the choice between the same universe but without one extra piece, I'll just go with the simpler model, right? So like even then I would still be an atheist towards that deistic God. Not saying I have certainty or anything, but it just like I don't have any good reason to accept it, so I'll just reject it. You know what I mean?
And that that was my turning point when I realized, because I remember I actually struggled with this question. I was like, okay, but what if somebody just started it off and then left it? And I was like, yeah, but what would be the difference between such a universe and a universe without a God? And I was like, nothing at all, clearly.
Yeah. I also kind of, when I was struggling with my deconversion and I'd been like fighting the whole way, which is something that I think some Christians, many Christians have told me that I'm an atheist because I just wanted to sin, or like I was like looking for a way to get out. I wasn't. I was fighting really hard to stay Christian, right? I didn't want to stop being a Christian. But at the end of that, I was like, well, I guess I'm a deist. And after a few months, I was like, I kind of came to the same realization where they're like, that's such a weak belief that it's not even worth having, you know?
Yeah, I also had the same 1-2 months. I remember when I was like, I'm not a Christian, but these fine-tuning arguments seem to make us. Where did life come from? How come? And I remember Matt Dillard, and I watched his show, one show, and all those Matt and Tracy Harris, and all the questions were answered in one show, and I was like, okay, I was making a fool of myself. I better.
Yeah. Nikki says, I think the God theory should be nothing more than a bedtime story. I would not go that far because I know a lot of thoughtful, intelligent Christians who seem to have, I disagree with them. I think they're wrong, but I don't think like they're silly for believing what they believe. Like there are definitely conceptions of God which are just self-refuting, and there are other conceptions of God which are evil and harmful. But I don't think it's I don't think believing in God is the same as like believing in fairies or something like that. I think they are equally non-existent, but I don't think they're equally unreasonable, if that makes sense. I think you can be a reasonable person and still be religious, is what I'm getting at, even if I think you're wrong.
I'm 50-50 on that, because there's something you said, like you can be skeptical. This is a bit philosophical, because I think skepticism should be highly correlated with evidence, because what guides you through your skepticism journey is where the evidence is leading you.
Right.
It's possible to be skeptical and have a wrong conclusion. It was a wrong conclusion, but But in most instances, you should be able to get to the right conclusion, because it's whatever conclusion you arrive to is properly supported by evidence. And so the one thing I would ask as someone who consider themselves atheist, a religious person who also think they are skeptic, is their best evidence. Because if they are skeptical enough and they have looked at evidence and they have arrived at that conclusion, God exists, I would also want to see that evidence with my skepticism and realize whether my problem is with my skepticism, or their methodology. Because if we are both skeptical, most likely we should arrive at nearly the same result, I think. Just like in a scientific world, yeah.
Well, it's possible that the two of us might not have access to the same information. So it could be that this other person has exposure to evidence that I do not have. And that is certainly true before we talk, right? After we talk and I ask them, like, what's your evidence? It could be, because we were talking earlier about how, like, why doesn't God, like, present himself to us? Well, maybe God presented himself to this person and just didn't present himself to me. That person might be completely justified in their belief and me be completely justified in not believing. And there's no way to bridge that gap. Now, I would still say my explanation would be, well, it's more likely that you're just wrong, right? Like, a lot of people think they had this experience and you think all of them are wrong. Well, maybe you're wrong too, you know? But I don't want to, like, totally discount the possibility that somebody could disagree with me, but still be reasonable in doing so, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. But except the fact where they try to, they have, for them, the instance where you say they have evidence or they have experience of God and you don't, then they want to make you believe on their experience and not your own experience. Yeah.
That would definitely be a problem. Like, if this person, I think, was practicing skepticism appropriately, like, let's say God came to me tomorrow and gave me all the evidence I wanted. It would be kind of like that story where, like, I can't remember, is Persephone the one who's, like, given foresight but can't, like, convince anyone? Like, I would know that I'm justified in believing. I would believe in God then, and I would be cursed with not being able to convince anyone, because why should anyone believe my experience? You know, it shouldn't be convincing to anybody. So
yeah,
that would be a tough spot to be in. All right, so you mentioned, so we talked about the divine hiddenness. You touched on problem of evil real briefly. That's probably my second favorite, and I don't think that's a surprise. Most people, I think those are the top two for most people. The counter argument to Cassandra, thank you for that's the one. I couldn't remember which one is, it doesn't matter. So problem of evil. The problem of evil strikes me as one that even if you think there is an answer, it's hard to, like, you can't just dismiss it, because if you just walk into a cancer ward, you know, it's hard to look at that and say that there's a loving God, because you have to believe that this God has a reason to make this person suffer, you know? And while I think that it is logically possible that that's correct, like, it could be that there's this massive plan I don't understand, and somehow this is contributing, but that seems so implausible. Like, I can understand, like, I don't know, maybe a drought is somehow beneficial or as a result of free will, but, like, a kid who just got leukemia, like a friend of mine, fortunately she got a donor, so she'll be fine now. But, like, there was a period there where it looked like she was born with a defect and was just gonna die. Like, she's 3. What did she do? You know?
Yeah. It can be really overwhelming. And what even makes it worse is I don't know. First of all, I think information is also how you get it. I think someone who is born and raised into a religious setup is unlikely to be skeptical than someone who just is not religious, and maybe they are now 20 years and I'm trying to convert them into a religion. Their thinking is very different from someone who has been indoctrinated from childhood. I think the process of indoctrination seems to greatly affect your skepticism, your ability to just argue because it starts with the wrong. It sets your mind to think in the reverse, where you start with the conclusion that this thing is right, and let me now go and look for justifications for this. Yeah, but for the problem of evil, I don't understand how some people, because we had a drought like in northeastern Kenya, and you'd think they would take a step back and look at it and say, no, there cannot be a good God who is allowing these people to die. But somehow it seems even to reinforce their belief system, which is weird for me, which is like counterintuitive. For them, they actually now the more they see like God is tempting them, the God has a bigger purpose than than they are seeing, and I personally I just don't get how you can even justify such an evil without with a clear conscience, with a clear humanity conscience. But somehow religious people manages to do it and still look at you straight in the face, like
I can.
And maybe just to add on that, on what Morris just said, there is this very famous photo that was taken by Kevin Carter, and it was taken around 1994. That was in Sudan, and it's a photo of. By then they thought it was a young girl, but it actually turned out to be a young boy. And he had trekked for miles trying to reach to the food relief center, and he was almost giving up, and he was just there, like curled up, and there was what's the vulture? There was a vulture right there, waiting to feast on this young kid. Immediately he died, and it sparked a lot of controversy because I remember the argument was like, why didn't the photographer help this young kid? And my argument to every Christian is that you realize your God has been in that position where he could have helped someone. At that point, at every disaster, he has been at that position, but he chose to do nothing. So how can you crucify Kevin Carter and ask, why didn't he help this young guy? Apparently, they were given instruction not to try and help any of the natives or touch them because they were told they had some diseases or contamination. And that's why he didn't help this young kid. But that photo actually helped rally for some financial aid and food relief. But my question is, your God has been in that exact situation at all times in history, yet he chose to do nothing. How can you justify that?
So to play devil's advocate a little bit, the kind of in a similar way you just said that this photo like led to a huge amount of financial aid, right? And so one could argue that perhaps that person shouldn't have helped because taking the photo was more important. Because yes, this child would suffer, but like it would bring you'd have the greater good. And that I hear similar arguments with God, where maybe he doesn't help here, but somehow there's a divine plan. You understand it makes a greater good, right?
And okay, with that, I always come back with a counter argument. Could God have helped that kid at that point so that the kid does not suffer and yet continue doing a greater good? Or could he not do that? At which that leaves them always dumbfounded because they're like, okay.
Well,
or could he have created a universe where people don't have to suffer like this? He could have, his divine plan could have been different, that nobody has to suffer to give a lesson to other people, whether it leads to greater good or not. He should just created if he's able to create a heaven where there's no suffering, Earth is a small planet. He could have easily done it at a click of a finger.
Right. And I think that also undermines the free will defense too, because that's another thing which doesn't help with like natural evils, but like often we're told that in order to have free will, there has to be these evils, right? But then you're left with, well, in heaven, it's perfect. Do we not have free will in heaven? And so either in heaven we're just mindless automatons, which was like the whole like if that's the case, like that's supposed to be the whole reason we did this. If we're just going to end up with mindless automatons, why not just start there, you know? But if you can be in heaven with free will, but also not these other things, then what's this? Like, why are we here? It also, though, undermines, I think, pulling in this consequentialist view of morality, this utilitarian view of morality, and applying it to God, saying, well, it's okay for God to allow this small evil because it would make a greater evil. You're saying that the reason it's okay is because of utilitarian ethics, which undermines another popular argument for theism, the argument from morality. They tell me all the time, I can be moral because I'm imbued with God's like will on my brain or whatever, but like without a universe with no God can't have morality. But you just used secular morality to justify God's behavior, right? So like clearly we don't need the divine will. We can reason on our own to get to moral arguments.
That's exactly. But the problem we have, especially in this country and this continent, is most people are indoctrinated from childhood. So every time you introduce like a verse in the Bible that is contrary to the Bible, like contrary to the normal morality, people who are actually convinced that they get their morality from the Bible, they suffer from this sudden cognitive dissonance. Like, I have never had, you brought up knowing this Bible is perfect. This is the word of God. And then you tell them, but you're also calling yourself a Christian and a feminist, so you believe in women empowerment. So do you believe in Corinthians 14 where it says you cannot, women should not speak before men or in church? So how do you interpret that with regard that you believe in women empowerment, but also and you realize that most people have been brought up in these prosperity gospel or these evangelicals where you can stay a whole life in that church, but every Sunday they cherry pick for you a nice verse, and when you are left free out there to go and face now people who have actually read the Bible, then most of them have no defense other than like what you're saying. God has a plan. God knows all that, and it's a very bad situation for most, but it's also very good for us because once that's normally the origin of skepticism for most of them. Yeah, the origin of doubting, exactly.
DM says, I think you have to demonstrate free will exists before it works as an apologetic. Well, you see, you just assume that it exists, and then you're good to go. Well, in their worldview, free will kind of comes along with the soul. Like, I don't think I have free will in the libertarian sense because I don't see any way that could work, but that's a whole other can of worms. I think when you were talking about people having the morality and kind of working backwards from there, I think that's true of like most people, Christian or not. Like, you basically, you have this feeling that this is right, and then you rationalize your way to that, is often how it works. And you can see this in practice with many religious organizations. Like today's in America, the staunchest, most fundamentalist, by the book Christian today would have been a bleeding heart liberal 300 years ago, So, they're definitely still moving with society. It's just they're a little bit behind usually.
But funny enough, they would if you told them they're applying secular morality, they would refuse. They'll say Bible is their source of morality.
And I think it's funny, like when Morris, you said about how they can defend something. There was one time I did this. I can say it was a small social experiment, but I actually saw an article on the news. It was a sad article that in Pakistan, I think it was in Pakistan, a young lady had, the court had demanded that she marry the guy who raped her. So she was actually raped, and the court demanded that she marry the person who raped her, and that was like her compensation or something. And I remember I went to this time where I was working. There were these young girls in human resource department. So I just sent it. I was like, "Hey, I just saw some sad piece of news, but these guys are saying that there was this girl in Pakistan, and this is what happened." And they were like, "What? That can happen in this day and age? And what have you?" And then I told them, and by the way, do you know that's what the Bible, the Old Testament, actually stipulated? And they were like, "No, you can't be serious." I was like, "Come on, let's open the verse." And they were there, and they're reading, I think it's Deuteronomy 22, 28, and 29. And they read it, and they're like, wait, what? They read it. They went through different versions trying to see if it's true, and they were dumbfounded. They were speechless. So I think once you see like something happening in these times, and then now you show it that it happened in that time, and that's what God stipulated, they're like, do you mean this thing actually happened? It was really there. And the look on their faces and how they reacted was just priceless.
Now, I want to caveat a bit and say that Christianity is a hugely varied religion. Not everyone is a fundamentalist. For example, a good friend of mine who's been on the channel before, Art Wright, he's a pastor in his church, doesn't believe that the Bible's literally true. They think it's a book that was written in the context of its culture. And so they talk about how, like, look, there's misogynistic power structures in the Bible. And so, like, yeah, slavery was wrong. What they said at this point, that was wrong. That was not correct, you know? And so they kind of have a more squishy view of God, where like they say like God is love, and so anything that contradicts that is wrong, is their view. Now,
but do they still take the Bible as a word of God?
So they'd say yes, but it's not like authoritative in the same way. So like they would, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but from my discussions with him, they see it as instructive and valuable. So like it's a tool, but it doesn't replace our God-given sense of morality and like intuition and empathy, is how like they would say that this is just a tool, and that is one of the tools we have in addition to our empathy and our reason and these other tools that we were given. It's just one of those tools. I think Art would agree with that, but I don't know. That's my impression anyway. Now
I think they would be much better people in practice, but they would have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to justify that versus the Bible, on the Bible. Yeah.
Right. Like when I'm confronted with that, like I'm like, well then just ditch the whole Bible thing. You can just be just do what you were gonna do anyway. Just, you know.
Yeah. You
But
have the morality written in your heart anyway. So
right. So Nerdy Rodent says God has a plan and it includes evil. That is an answer to the problem of evil. If you just say God's a jerk and then like, no, God wanted evil because he's kind of mean, like that's an answer, you know. It does throw out the Abrahamic conception of God. Ian, friend of the channel, friend of the channel from Australia, says Australia is increasing up from, see, it says 29% in 2011 to 40% in 2022. Look at that. Nice. I think we've seen a jump in America. I can't remember the exact numbers. I want to say it's up to like 25-ish% of like non-religious, which is up from single digits some decades ago.
I think I saw it, but it was not a reliable source. I saw a poll that put it for the first time the religions have crossed the 51% mark in America.
Let's see. Pew Research is usually good.
I don't know if it was one of those peer-reviewed for the Gallup poll, I think.
2021 Pew Research says 3 in 10 U.S. adults are religiously unaffiliated. So, wow. Self-identified Christians make up 63% of the U.S. population, according to that, which is way down from like 80% when I started thinking about this. All right, so we've talked a lot about our arguments for atheism, obviously, but I think as good skeptics, it's important that we engage with the strongest argument on the other side. And I firmly believe that if you can't articulate the other side, then you probably don't understand their position very well. So why don't we switch gears again and share what we think the best argument for theism is. It doesn't necessarily, obviously, it's not persuasive to us because then we'd be theists, you know. That doesn't mean that they don't have any argument that we think is the best one. So what do you think is the best argument, in your opinion, for theism?
I